Ollie.
What's up, vintage moto lovers? Bill Wheeler here, Wheelhouse Garage. Welcome to episode number 9 of A Bike and a Beer, the show where every Saturday I feature a really cool vintage motorcycle while drinking an appropriately paired beer. If you've subscribed to the channel already, thank you so much. If you haven't, go ahead and tap that button in the lower right hand corner of this screen and you'll be in. So, hard to express my excitement today. We have here a TRIBSA Motocrosser built by the man himself, Mr. Dick Bugsy Mann. And we're going to be diving into everything here. This bike belongs to my good buddy Al Wenzel, who let me borrow it. Thank you so much for that, Al. Al also let me ride this around the Laguna Seca race course for the tribute to Dick Mann last year during MotoFest, which was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, to say the least. The beer we're going to be drinking today is a Point Special from Stevens Point Brewery in Wisconsin. We're drinking this beer today because my buddy Al, who owns this bike, just completed a long road trip through the northern states of the U.S., and he picked up this hard-to-find beer. It's absolutely delicious. I'm not going to pretend that I've never had this before because we kicked a few back while I picked up this bike, but it's a really smooth, well-balanced lager. Oh, it's absolutely delicious, and these guys have been making beer for a long time. 1857 they started making beer. They were literally serving it to military people in the Civil War, so they've got quite a long history. Now we're going to be diving into all the components of this bike, but really the most important thing is that it was hand-built by Dick Mann himself. And if you're in the vintage motorcycle world, of course you know Dick Mann, and you probably worship him to some degree. But if you're new to this kind of stuff, Dick Mann was an incredibly important figure in motorcycle history. He's a 2-time AMA Grand National Champion. He's a Hall of Famer. But beyond that, he was just an amazing ambassador for the sport. He was an amazing mechanic and just a friend to everyone. Everyone who knew him loved and respected him. And so he's just a really, really important figure. After his racing career, which literally stretched into 3 decades, he continued to build motorcycles and consult for manufacturers. There's a small group of lucky individuals that get to own bikes that were actually made by Dick himself, and this is one of them. So this is a TRIBSA, and if you're unfamiliar with what that means, it's a combination of Triumph and BSA, which is what this bike is. It has major components from both manufacturers. The motor on this bike is a 1957 pre-unit 650 twin. It's TR6, which means it has a single carburetor. The frame on this bike is from a BSA A10. It's a duplex style frame, which means it has 2 down tubes here, as opposed to what you would have found mated to this motor in 1957 from Triumph, which would have been a single down tube. These frames are phenomenal. In fact, it's kind of well known that the Rickman brothers were heavily inspired by this frame when they made their competition frames. This frame is actually from a street bike, which you can tell by the residual key lock here up on the steering stem, but they all had the same geometry, so it didn't matter. And Dick was a very resourceful guy. He collected a lot of parts over the years, and he built basically all of his custom bikes from parts that he had in his shop already. The gearbox on this bike is also from BSA. It bears the stamp SC, which means it's a scrambler gearbox. It's a 4-speed, and it's configured as first gear up and then 3 gears down. This bike has a BTH competition magneto. It's actually been upgraded with electronic points. Now, once you've seen a few Dick Mann built bikes, you kind of get a feel for them and they become easier to recognize. He has some real signature moves that you'll probably start to notice. One of those is the paint scheme on this tank. This, I don't even know what you call it, like a burgundy red with the gold pinstriping is very signature of Dick. This brake lever here, you can find this style brake lever on almost all of his bikes. It's a tubular arm, and then he has this kind of squished piece of round tubing that he's filed some grooves in. Towards the end of his motorcycle production career, let's call it. He used a lot of aluminum stock for things like fender stays and chain guides and motor supports. I absolutely love this foot peg mount. It's a little bit more rear set than what you would have found stock, which I agree with. The stock setting is kind of far forward. It's a little bit awkward. And for an aggressive riding position, I much prefer these where Dick has put these pegs. This motor breathes fire through these straight pipes, and boy, they're hot too. It got me yesterday, but that's my fault. This custom built tin is made by Bugsy himself with this custom air box. This motor's fed by a new Amel 930 concentric. You can still buy these, so if you're having problems getting your old Amel working properly, it's probably worn out. The slide's probably worn out, and you can buy a brand new carburetor from Amel. So do that. Just don't put a Mikuni on it, okay? Just say no. A couple of cool little upgrades on this carburetor too. These awesome pins here allow you to take the float bowl off without having to use a screwdriver. You can take it off with a wrench. And then it also has a nice knob here on the air screw and the idle adjustment, so you can adjust those on the fly before your motocross race. Up front we have a lovely set of Seriani forks, which are held in place by Bader triple clamps. There's a 21-inch front wheel for motocross, which is orbiting a awesome Rickman hub and brake setup. And I tell you what, the Rickman brothers knew what they were doing with brakes. This thing stops on a dime. It's very impressive for a drum brake system. Out back, we have some NGB shocks, which are a favorite among ARMA racers, and an 18-inch rear. This is just a flat track tire, which is on here for convenience right now. You'd run a knobby for motocross. This hub is one of the coolest things that BSA ever invented. It's a quick disconnect hub. You can pop this side off and slide that wheel off without messing with the chain or sprocket or drum. Pretty cool piece. I love those. Up here on the controls, we have Amel style levers, a gunner gasser throttle. Cool little note on these. The original gunner gassers were complete right here. They didn't have this recess, but after people kind of complained that they couldn't get the full throw out of their front brake lever, they made this little recess. So if you're setting up a gunner gasser throttle, that's what that recess is for. Make sure you have that set up. Aluminum fender up front, in really the only way I prefer to see them, which is mounted to the fork tubes. I don't know, on old bikes it just looks wrong to me when it's up here, but that's just me. This is a stock oil tank from an A10, which already has a really nice shape to it. Solo seat, something you can see on a Spitfire Scrambler or something like that. Fairly easy to come by, actually. Thankfully. Those bait seats for those Triumphs, they're getting crazy. Aluminum fender in the rear. This is a really purpose-built machine. There's no frills, no fancy stuff that's unnecessary. Dick Mann built these bikes to be ridden. In fact, I've heard if he suspected you weren't going to ride the bike and you were just going to put it on display or something like that, he wouldn't even build one for you. All that said, that's going to wrap it up for this bike. It's an amazing machine. You get on it, fire it up, it just, man, you just want to twist that throttle and haul ass. So thank you so much for watching. We're going to be back next Saturday with a whole new beer and a whole new bike. I look forward to you joining then. Thank you so much. Cheers, everybody. Oh, man. It's really cool. The brakes work phenomenally. God, it's so wicked. Sweet bike. Thanks, Al.